From being involved in a hit-and-run with a pregnant woman to a potential doping violation, here's the truth behind Jon Jones' controversial legacy in the UFC.
Good striking. Spins again. Caught him in the midsection. Nice spinning back kick.
Starting with how the greatest light heavyweight fighter entered the UFC. In case you didn't know, Jon Jones once played football in high school, which is also how he got the nickname Bones, by the way. His coach called him that because of his skinny frame, and ever since, the nickname ended up sticking. From playing as a defensive linebacker, he then moved on to wrestling, and that's when he discovered his talents. He was insanely good at making his opponents submit because of his aggressive and fast takedown style.
Muay Thai, athletic, young, suplex, dynamic, a Greco-Roman All-American, and a junior college national wrestling champion. We're seeing those skills.
So much so that he even went on to win the state wrestling championship, after which he wrestled at Iowa Central Community College, where he won the JUCO national championship for wrestling. Finally, figuring out what he wanted to do with his life, Jones dropped out of college to pursue a career in mixed martial arts. But his parents, who were pretty religious, did not agree with his choice of lifestyle. Believe it or not, they actually wanted him to become a pastor instead. Yeah, can you imagine the missed potential? In fact, they actively encouraged him to stop participating in MMA and to preach instead. But Jon was pretty adamant. He knew what he wanted. He wanted to become a great fighter, and he did.
Looks like he's got it very deep, Mike. I can't see it from this angle. Looking to finish it. He put him out. He put him out. Wow. Jon Jones.
Bones amassed a record of 6-0 in just 3 months in the U.S. Kickboxing Association. Within a couple of weeks, he was offered a chance to fight in the UFC, and he accepted. Soon, Jon made his debut at UFC 87 against Andre Gusmao, who was taken down by the first-time pro fighter using takedown techniques that nobody had ever seen before.
29-28, and Cecil People scores at 30-27, declaring the winner by unanimous decision, Johnny Bones.
He dominated Andre with a clever combination of spinning leg kicks and elite striking, earning him his first win via unanimous decision. He then went on to win his next 2 bouts against Stephen Bronner and Jake O'Brien, too. Now, his exemplary performance earned him a new 4-fight contract with the UFC. His next fight was with Mark Hamill, and boy, was it a controversial one.
And he's just in utter shock and disbelief. And he doesn't want any applause.
Jon had been dominating Mark at first. Mark was stuck on the floor, and Jones threw a couple of 12-6 elbows at his nose. Now, some of you might not know this, but this move's illegal in the UFC because the blows can cause severe injuries. The fight was stopped at first, and Bones was given a penalty, but Mark dislocated his shoulder and was thus awarded the win.
It's all over! Wow. Matt Hamill has been defeated by Jon Jones. Wow, yeah, he's bleeding bad.
The president of the UFC, Dana White, who's never shied away from making his opinions clear, tried to get Jones's disqualification overturned to no avail. Bones didn't let adversity get him down, though. He went on to win a UFC title belt in a fight with Shogun Rua. He then defeated Quinton Jackson with a rear naked choke, successfully defending his title. He also became the first person to make Jackson submit, which was quite a big feat. His next fight was with Lyoto the Dragon Machida, and it was his toughest challenge yet.
Any question from the champion? If you want to touch glove, touch him now, and step back so we can start.
Let's do this thing. Jon Jones, Lyoto Machida.
It was in the second round that Jon completely battered Lyoto. He got Lyoto in a standing guillotine choke, after which his whole body went limp. And just like that, the fight was over. Bones went on to have a 12-1 record in the UFC, and then was all set to become the promotion's biggest star. He broke Tito Ortiz's record for most consecutive title defenses by fighting the Swedish champ Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 165. And get this, soon this bout became the greatest title fight that the light heavyweight division of UFC had ever seen. So what went down? Well, Alexander cut up Jones's eye pretty badly in the first round itself. It was clear that Bones had finally met his match. That fight was downright amazing. I mean, it went on for like 5 whole rounds. Can you believe that? Jon won the bout by unanimous decision, but it all went downhill from there. And this is where the disappointing part of Jon Jones's legacy starts. Brace yourselves, it's not pretty. Jones had the worst 3 years of not only his life, but also his career starting from 2015. He was involved in a terrifying hit and run, and he did not make good choices after that. He fled from the scene, returning only to retrieve his bong that he'd accidentally left in his car. What's worse is that the person he hit was a pregnant woman. Yikes! Luckily, neither the woman nor her baby were grievously injured, but Jones did not come out looking too good from that incident. And of course, actions have consequences. He was stripped of his belt, which he'd held for the past 4 years. Ouch! That must have been devastating. That's not all, though. He was also suspended from the UFC indefinitely. This hit the fans like a wrecking ball, to be honest. I was crushed. He was a fan-favorite UFC champion, and hundreds of people flocked to see his fights. It was a dark day for fans of Jon Jones all around the world. The best fighter had just been kicked out. Luckily, this ban only lasted around 6 months, and Bones was allowed to fight again pretty soon after. But little did he know, his comeback fight was scheduled to be with Daniel Cormier. It seems like Jones's bad luck kicked in once again, though surprisingly, Daniel withdrew from the fight due to a painful foot injury, and Jon had to fight Ovince St. Preux instead. He proved that he was still the best in the game by beating Preux via unanimous decision. Now, to become the official light heavyweight champion once again, all he had to do was beat Cormier. The two were all set to fight at UFC 200, but surprise, surprise, that fight didn't happen either, and this time, it was all Jones's fault. He was removed from the fight because of a potential doping violation, and had his title stripped once again, which made him the first fighter to have his title stripped twice. On Joe Rogan's podcast, Jon claimed that he'd taken an off-brand Cialis tablet, which is what caused his drug test to come back positive. He was banned from fighting in the promotion for a full year. When the American fighter came back, he was once again pitted against Daniel Cormier. This time, thanks to his lucky stars, Jones was finally able to fight Daniel and win. This earned him his title back, and all was well. Just kidding. Believe it or not, things actually got worse for Jones after this. After the UFC champ's win, it was revealed that he'd failed his drug test, and this time it wasn't because of an off-the-shelf Cialis pill. Bones tested positive for an anabolic steroid called turinabol, which is commonly used by baseball players. The drug strengthens the muscles more effectively and quickly. That was that. Jones' win against Cormier was officially changed to a no contest, and he was suspended once again from the promotion, this time for 18 whole months. On Joe Rogan's podcast, the American mixed martial artist talked about this experience and controversy. He explained that he felt invincible and that nothing could ever stop him. Well, Jones, hubris is deadly. Guess he learned that the hard way. Jon went on to say that he'd get blackout drunk every week before a fight just so he'd have something to blame it on if he lost. He was on top of the UFC world and destroyed almost every single one of his opponents. It's safe to say that the fighter thought that nothing could actually bring him down. He returned after his suspension at UFC 232 in a rematch against Gustafsson, which he won in the third round via a technical knockout. This earned him the title of the light heavyweight champion of the UFC once again, and all was well again. With that, that's a wrap on the truth behind Jon Jones.